A sacred mountain no one is allowed to climb, with a temple said to hold incredible secrets at its base. Hidden caves, top secret ancient archives, these are forbidden archaeological sites experts are not allowed to enter. Mount Kailash in Tibet is one of the most mysterious and sacred mountains in the world. It's considered the spiritual center of the universe by Hindus and Buddhists. In fact, it's so sacred that no one is allowed to climb it. The locals firmly believe that attempting to scale it would bring bad luck or even total disaster. There's also a temple at the base of the mountain which is said to hide all sorts of secrets. As for what those secrets could be, ancient artifacts, powerful relics, who knows, but some say it's all buried underneath. Unfortunately, we'll probably never know because no one's allowed to go searching for it. The Tibetans hold it in such high regard that they've kept the area mostly off limits for centuries. It's much more than an archaeological site, it's a forbidden zone that explorers and historians can only dream of digging into. Moving on to the Mogao Grottoes in China, which are literally full of ancient art that dates back over 1,000 years. These caves are a time capsule filled with statues, murals, and scrolls shedding a lot of light on the history of Buddhism. The cave complex has over 700 caves, and a lot of them are carved into the cliffside and feature art depicting centuries of religious history. And yes, you can visit parts of this site, but some of these caves are completely off limits. And why is that? Well, because they're delicate. Some of the artwork in there is extremely fragile, and one thing people are just great at is ruining things. Too many mouth-breathing tourists start trudging through the place, and before you know it, there's Cheeto stains on the 1,000-year-old Buddha statue. Some of the caves have actually been sealed shut, and even some of the researchers who studied the site haven't had access to them. There's a lot we don't know about what's hidden deep inside the caves. What if it's not just fragile stuff though? What if there could be more? Now we're talking about something that's a little more modern, but still totally forbidden: the Vatican's secret archives. If you didn't know, the Vatican has an enormous collection of ancient documents, manuscripts, and records that go back hundreds, even thousands of years. Things that are either so important or rare that they're kept locked up in an area of the Vatican that most people can't even get close to. The archives aren't just secret in the sense of having stuff hidden away. This is a literal vault where even some of the most famous historians and scholars can only access documents after being vetted and approved by the Vatican itself. And I gotta believe there's someone breathing down their neck when they're in there too. Some pieces of history have been made public over time, but a lot of what's in the archives are still heavily guarded. Who knows what's in there? Let your imagination run wild. Some think that documents related to the early church, lost historical accounts, or details about some of the more controversial events in history could be locked away in there. But unless you become Pope one day, you'll probably never get the chance to find out. And I'm not exaggerating. Some historians have spent years trying to get permission to just crack open a handful of files. Next up, we have China's famous terracotta army. You've probably heard of this, the thousands of life-size statues built to guard the tomb of King Huang, China's first emperor. We've all seen images, we've all heard stories, but the emperor's tomb has never actually been excavated. It's been sealed for thousands of years, and while researchers have examined the army, they've never actually gotten to look inside the burial chamber of the emperor himself. The tomb is said to be packed with treasure though, and historical artifacts. Who knows what else? But here's why we still can't get in. There are a couple reasons. For one, there's fear it could be damaged. The tomb is said to be full of mercury, which was thought to protect the emperor in the afterlife, so excavating it could cause chemical reactions that would completely ruin the site. In fact, when they've dug around, they've found signs of dangerous mercury levels. And then there's the fear of booby traps. Legend has it that the emperor rigged up all these deadly traps so that his tomb wouldn't be disturbed, and some archaeologists still fear that some of these traps may be active. So even though we're all dying to know what's inside, it's not happening, at least not anytime soon. I always love saying this one, Sacsayhuamán. No, I'm not talking to the female members of the audience, although I'm sure you're all lovely. Sacsayhuamán is a stone structure that sits above Cusco, Peru. It's said to be one of the most amazing examples of Inca engineering. The site's made up of these huge stones, some weighing over several tons, fitted together so perfectly you can't slip a piece of paper between them, and we don't really know how the Incas moved these massive stones and placed them so perfectly like that. Some people believe there's still still more buried at the site that hasn't been uncovered. Archaeologists have spent years studying it, but there are sections that are completely off limits. Some of the surrounding areas are sacred to the local people, and authorities have restricted access to these spots. One restricted area is called Chincana, a long underground cave said to connect the fortress to the Temple of the Sun. But it's also possible there's some other stuff hidden beneath the earth that no one's dug up yet. Could there be more ancient tunnels or artifacts from lost civilizations that lived even before the Incas? Well, unless more excavation is ever allowed, we'll never really know. The Library of Alexandria was once one of the greatest centers of learning in the ancient world. Scrolls from all over the world filled with knowledge from the greatest minds of the time. But as legend has it, the library was destroyed in a series of disasters. All that knowledge just poof, vanished. Some people believe that there might still be remnants of the library buried beneath the streets of Alexandria, but since the original site was destroyed, digging there is no easy feat. Archaeologists can't just go around tearing up city blocks looking for ancient scrolls, as much as I'm sure they'd love to. Because Egypt is protective of its historical sites, it's nearly impossible for any expert to get permission to dig in the exact spots where the library might have been. But the idea that there's this entire lost collection of scrolls containing the wisdom of ancient civilizations just waiting to be found is a pretty fun idea and would make for a great Indiana Jones movie. Alright, now we're heading into real conspiracy theory territory. Antarctica. Yes, I am talking about pretty much the entire continent. Is it weird to call Antarctica an archaeological site? Maybe, but so much of it is unexplored and off limits. You also have a surprising amount of people who believe that ancient civilizations once existed there long before it froze over. Some explorers have claimed to find evidence of ancient structures buried beneath the ice, but again, Antarctica is mostly off limits to outsiders. Only certain countries are allowed to explore it, and even then, they can only study certain parts of the continent. The global treaty that governs the exploration of Antarctica has strict rules about what can and can't be explored, and there's been very little effort to dig deeper into these quote-unquote mysteries. Some also say there's stuff like hidden technology and pyramids beneath the ice, but because of the restrictions, it's hard to know for sure. Scientists seem to be more focused on studying the environment there, so it's going to take a lot to convince anyone to actually go digging for ancient civilizations, unless that hasn't already been going on and things aren't being covered up. The Bosnian Pyramids are pretty controversial. Now I know what you're probably thinking, what do you mean pyramids in Bosnia? Well, some people believe that this set of mountains are actually man-made pyramids. Supposedly, if these pyramids really do exist, they're ancient, older than the Egyptian ones, and contain mysteries that could change our understanding of human history. Of course, the scientific community is pretty split on whether or not these pyramids are actually a thing. Some say they're just natural rock formations. Others insist they're evidence of some ancient construction. All the same, the site is mostly off limits for mainstream excavation. Local authorities have kept the area restricted, and there are some serious debates over whether or not it should be explored. Some argue that the whole thing could be an elaborate hoax, but either way, the site is basically forbidden for archaeologists. Mount Shasta in California is obviously gorgeous, but there's said to be a laundry list of weird things about it. The mountain's been tied to all sorts of strange legends. Supposedly, there's a lost civilization that lives deep beneath it. There have been lots of UFO sightings, and while locals might share their own theories about what's beneath the surface, access to Mount Shasta is strictly controlled. People claim there are these hidden caverns and ancient structures inside the mountain, but so far, no one's been allowed to explore the mountain's more remote areas. There's also a deep spiritual significance for Native American tribes in the area, which has led to even more restrictions on excavation. But before you go yelling at me in the comments about how you've been here before, so it's not off limits, yes, people are free to hike a lot of the area, but getting anywhere near the more mysterious parts of it, not so much. Finally, we have the Cave of Mummies in Guanajuato, Mexico. This cave is home to some of the best preserved mummies you'll ever see. The mummies were naturally preserved in the cave's dry environment, and a lot of them look eerily lifelike. Sounds weird to say lifelike when they are indeed corpses of actual people, but I mean some of them almost look like they'll just open their eyes and start walking away. Archaeologists have been allowed to study the mummies, but there's a catch. Only a select few have been able to go inside the actual cave. Many parts of the site are restricted because of how delicate the mummies are, but it's not just the mummies that are interesting, it's also the cave itself. Some think there may be more bodies hidden deeper inside the cave that haven't been uncovered yet. So what else could be lurking in the darkness? Well, unless you get special access, you'll never know for sure. With all that said, I've been your host James, and I will catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.